is such an honor to represent the family of Frederick Douglass and Anna Murray Douglass and to be on this hallowed ground in New Bedford, Massachusetts. And I hope I don't upset anybody here, but I am actually against getting air conditioning in here. Because I think it would take away from the history, and Frederick Douglass, the abolitionist, didn't have any air. So let's do this thing exactly like they would have done it back in the day. So, Mayor. As I was introduced, I am the great-great-great-grandson of Frederick Douglass, and I'm also the great-great-grandson of educator and founder of Tuskegee Normal School and Institute, now at Tuskegee University, Booker T. Washington. I actually wake up every morning and still say wow and pinch myself. You know, and every time I tell people what my relationship is to my ancestors, not only is it a mouthful trying to say all of those greats, but it sometimes makes me feel far removed. And you may be sitting there having a hard time trying to imagine what my connection is to Douglass and Washington. It's kind of like trying to picture what $1 billion looks like with so many zeros. But many people know or knew a grandparent. Some of you may have even known a great-grandparent. And that's how close I feel to both of my ancestors, because you see, my great-grandmother, Fanny Douglass, to whom I was very close, she lived to be 103 years old. And she met Frederick Douglass when she was a little girl. She didn't know that she was going to grow up and marry his grandson, Joseph, at the time, but that's what happened. And my Aunt Portia, to whom I was also very close, lived to be 95, and she was Booker T. Washington's daughter. And I remember being a little boy and sitting on my great-grandmother Fanny Douglass's lap, and she would tell me what it was like to know, and she would call him the man with the great big white hair. And I remember sitting on my Aunt Portia's lap, and she would tell me firsthand stories about her father, Booker T. Washington. And several years ago, I was with a group of 6th grade students, and they were looking at me almost cross-eyed, like, man, you are so far removed, and what does all of this history and all of those greats have to do with my life today? So I was trying to bring some context to our conversation and put some perspective on it, and I had this thought that hands that actually touched the great Frederick Douglass and hands that touched the great Booker T. Washington also touched mine. So in a sense, even with all of those greats, I can say I stand just one person away from history. I stand one person away from each man, and I stand one person away from slavery. We're not that far removed from the history of slavery in this country. And I'm going to just talk to you briefly because I need to keep my remarks short, but I never want to get up in front of an audience and not talk about where my ancestors came from. Both of them were born into the most horrific conditions that a human being can be subjected to, but yet through the power of education. Now, we know it was illegal to teach an enslaved person to read and write, so both of my ancestors would have to steal their education. And later in life, when Frederick Douglass was a statesman, and the first African-American nominated for Vice President of the United States, first African-American U.S. Marshal, first African-American ambassador to Haiti, first African-American reporter of deeds in the District of Columbia, and the list goes on and on and on, and people would ask him, they'd say, Frederick, I need to know, where did you go to school, where did you get your education? And on occasion, he would respond by saying, my degree is written on my back. Both of my ancestors would have to steal their education. Now, as president of the Frederick Douglass Family Initiatives, we work on issues of human trafficking prevention education in schools. And everything that we do is based on the foundation of one story in Frederick Douglass's life, which I'll share with you right now. And that was, he was born on the eastern shore of Maryland to a black woman who was enslaved and to a white man. It was presumed that his master was his father. He never had a pair of pants or shoes until he was about 7 years old. He used to sleep head first in an old corn sack on cold winter nights with his feet hanging out because it was the only way he could try and keep himself warm. But he did have something happen in his life when he was about 8 or 9 years old that he later wrote about and he called divine providence in his favor. And that was, he was chosen from among all of the children on this plantation to go to Baltimore to be the house servant for his master's brother, Hugh. Now, the importance of this move was he was leaving an environment where he most likely wouldn't have had an opportunity to learn how to read and write. He was going to go to the big city in Baltimore and be around free black children that knew how to read and write, and also poor white children. What happened most importantly when he got there was his slave mistress, Sophia Auld, had never had a slave before. And she didn't know that it was illegal to teach young Frederick how to read and write. She had a son that she was teaching Tommy, and she saw this bright child who was eager to learn. So as a kind Christian lady, she just began to teach Frederick his ABCs. But when his master found out about it, those of you that are shaking your head know the story, he got angry. And he forbade the teaching and the lessons, and he looked at his wife and he looked at young Frederick. And the way Frederick described this later in life, this is the message that he took away. And his master said, you cannot teach a slave how to read and write, because if you do, it will unfit him to be a slave. Did you all hear that message? The education will unfit him to be a slave. And Frederick looked at his master and he thought, if you don't want me to have this, I'm going to do everything in my power to gain it.